Maria Jenkins woke to the sound of her cell phone vibrating on her bedside table. She opened her eyes slowly, adjusting to the light filtering through the blinds. The lieutenant colonel looked at the clock. 4:17 a.m. She took a deep breath and answered the call. "Jenkins," she replied in a firm voice, fully awake in a matter of seconds. "Lieutenant Colonel, we have a situation. Code Red. General Braddock requests your immediate presence at the compound. I'll be there in 30 minutes. Maria stood up quickly, put on her training uniform, and tied her curly hair into a tight bun. Her athletic body, the result of years of intense training, moved with the precision and efficiency of a machine. At 32, she had built an impressive career in the United States Army, culminating in her current position as commander of Delta Force, the nation's most secretive and lethal special operations. In the mirror, she observed for a moment the scar that cut across the right side of her face, a reminder of her first mission in Afghanistan. Maria had followed a path that few believe possible for an African-American woman born in the Bronx. Now, she commanded some of the most sensitive operations in the fight against global terrorism. As she drove to her base in Fort Bragg, North Carolina, Maria allowed herself a moment of reflection. It had been 3 months since she had seen her family in Atlanta. Her husband, David, a university professor, and their 2 children, 10-year-old Maya and 8-year-old Marcus, had grown accustomed to her prolonged and sudden absences. But that didn't make the separation any easier. Her cell phone rang again. It was David. "Hey, you disappeared early," he said, his voice still asleep. "Sorry, I didn't mean to wake you. I have a situation at the base, I understand. The boys will miss you at breakfast. We were planning on having pancakes." Maria smiled. Visits to her family were rare and precious. She had arrived last night to spend the weekend, taking advantage of a rare moment of calm at work. Now, less than 12 hours later, she was returning to her duty. "Tell them I love them. I'll try to come back as soon as possible. Take care, Maria. We love you." She hung up, feeling that familiar lump in her throat. Balancing her military career and family had never been easy, especially in a unit as demanding as Delta Force. As one of the few women in command positions in the Special Forces, Maria carried not only the responsibility of her missions but also the weight of being a pioneer in traditionally male territory. Upon arriving at the base, Maria was immediately taken to the underground operating room. General Braddock, a 60-year-old man with gray hair and an imposing posture, waited with a grave expression. "Jenkins, we have a critical situation. A terrorist group has kidnapped the American ambassador to Yemen along with his team. We have intelligence indicating that they are planning a public execution within 48 hours." Maria absorbed the information quickly as she observed the map projected on the main screen. The location of the captivity was a fortified complex in the mountains, surrounded by hostile militias. "I want teams Alpha and Bravo ready for deployment within 6 hours. We'll need air support and coordination with local intelligence." The room sprang into immediate motion at her command. Maria was known for her ability to make quick and efficient decisions under pressure, a quality that had been crucial to her rise through the military ranks. While the team prepared, Maria mentally reviewed the action plan. It would be a high-risk operation, requiring absolute precision. Her mind was completely focused on the mission when her phone vibrated again. It was a text message from her neighbor Caroline. "Emergency. Police at your home. Come immediately." A chill ran down her spine. Her family was in danger. Maria felt the world spin around her as she tried to process this new information. Without wasting any time, she approached the general. "Sir, I have a family emergency. I need to leave." The general looked at her in surprise. In 10 years of working together, Maria had never asked to be excused during an operation. "Jenkins, we are 6 hours away from launch. Major Rodriguez can assume initial command. I'll be back in 4 hours." After a moment of hesitation, the general nodded. 4 hours, Lieutenant Colonel. Maria rushed to the waiting helicopter and authorized a direct flight to Atlanta. During the journey, she repeatedly tried to contact David, but all calls went to voicemail. Panic grew with each passing minute without news. Upon landing in Atlanta, a military vehicle was waiting for her. On the way home, Maria tried to remain calm, but her thoughts wavered between the worst possible scenarios. What could have happened? Had her work put her family in danger? As the car approached the quiet suburban street where her family lived, Maria spotted 3 police cars parked in front of her house. Curious neighbors watched from a distance, some recording with their cell phones. Her heart raced. Before the car had even come to a complete stop, Maria jumped out and ran toward the house. An officer blocked her path. "Ma'am, you can't go through. This is a crime scene. This is my home. My family is inside." The officer examined her suspiciously, his eyes lingering briefly on the military uniform she was wearing. "Your name?" "Lieutenant Colonel Maria Jenkins, United States Army." The officer exchanged glances with another nearby policeman who spoke into his radio. "Wait here, ma'am." Maria watched the scene with growing anxiety. Through the open door, she could see police officers moving inside her house. Where were David and the children? What had happened? A middle-aged man in a suit approached, accompanied by 2 officers. His bearing indicated authority. "I'm Detective Reynolds. Are you Maria Jenkins?" "Yes." "Where is my family?" "Ms. Jenkins, there was an incident at your residence. We received an anonymous report of suspicious activity. Upon arrival, we found a man and 2 children. The man was arrested for resisting police intervention." Maria felt her blood run cold. "Arrested? That man is my husband, David Jenkins. He's a university professor. The children are our children." "Ma'am." The suspect did not produce identification and resisted when officers attempted to restrain the children. "He is currently in custody at the Atlanta Police Department." "And my children?" "The children are under the care of social services until we can verify their identity and situation." Anger surged through Maria's throat like acid. "Detective, I demand my husband's immediate release and my children's return." "This is outrageous." The detective observed her with an impassive expression. "Ma'am, we are following standard procedures. We need to verify some information. We received a specific report about possible human trafficking at this residence." "Human trafficking? I've lived here for 5 years. I'm a U.S. Army officer. My husband is a history professor at the University of Georgia." "Ms. Jenkins, I understand your frustration, but until we have fully verified the situation, we cannot release the suspect or the children." Maria took a deep breath, trying to control her anger. Years of crisis management training had helped her maintain an outward composure, even though she was seething. "And so I want to see the warrant that authorized entry onto my property." The detective hesitated. "Reacted on an emergency report. No warrant then." "And who filed this complaint?" "This information is confidential during the investigation." Maria looked around, noticing several neighbors filming the situation. She then realized that this was no simple police commotion. There was something more going on. "Detective Reynolds, I want to speak to your superior immediately, and I demand that a lawyer be made available for my husband." The detective nodded stiffly. "You can come with us to the police station, ma'am." On her way to the police station, Maria made several calls. The first was to the Army's legal department. The second was to her commander, informing him of the situation. The third was to Caroline, the neighbor who had sent the message. "Maria, thank God you came. It was awful. The police raided your house this morning. David tried to explain who he was, but they handcuffed him in front of the children. Maya and Marcus were screaming. I tried to tell them your neighbors, but nobody listened to me." "Carolyn, do you know what triggered this?" There was a pause. "Well, last night when you arrived, Helen mentioned that she saw a black man entering your house. She didn't know you were married to, Maria closed her eyes, the reality of the situation becoming clear. Helen, the new neighbor who had moved in 2 months ago, apparently wasn't aware that Maria, a black woman, was married to a black man and had children, and her first instinct upon seeing David was to call the police. Carolyn, I need you to gather the other neighbors who witnessed what happened. I'll need witnesses." At the police station, Maria was greeted by Captain Peterson, a burly man with a stern expression. "Ms. Jenkins, I understand your concern, but we are following procedures. The suspect, my husband," Maria corrected firmly. Mr. Jenkins refused to identify himself and resisted my officer's approach. "Captain, my husband was at home with our children when armed police officers raided the property without a warrant. Any resistance was in self-defense and in defense of our children. We had reason to believe there was an emergency situation." based on an anonymous tip from a neighbor who saw a black man enter the home of a black family. This is not an emergency, Captain. This is racial profiling. The captain maintained a neutral expression, but Maria noticed a slight discomfort in his eyes. Miss Jenkins, your documents have been verified and we have confirmed your identity. However, procedure requires that we keep the suspect, my husband. Maria insisted again. Mr. Jenkins is in custody until we conclude our investigation. At that moment, the door to the room opened, and a man in a suit entered, accompanied by 2 military officers. Captain Peterson, I am Colonel Harriman, attorney for the Department of Defense, and these are Major Wilson and Captain Torres from Special Operations Command. We are here to resolve the situation of Lieutenant Colonel Jenkins and his family. Colonel Harriman placed a folder on the table. I have here direct orders from the Pentagon for the immediate release of David Jenkins and his children, Maya and Marcus Jenkins. Any further delay will be considered an obstruction to national security. Captain Peterson visibly paled. National security? We were just following a procedure based on bias and without a warrant, violating multiple constitutional rights. The Department of Defense is particularly interested in knowing why the family of a high-ranking senior officer was treated in this way. Maria observed the change in the dynamics of the room. The power and authority she wielded in her professional life, normally invisible in her civilian life as a wife and mother, were now fully manifested. 40 minutes later, Maria was hugging David and the children at the entrance of the police station. David had a cut lip and a bruise forming on his face. Maya and Marcus were visibly shaken, clinging tightly to their parents. Mommy, they hurt Daddy, Maya sobbed. They said he was a criminal. Maria hugged her daughter tightly. That was a terrible mistake, darling. Daddy did nothing wrong. David met Maria's eyes, a mixture of relief and sadness in his gaze. They didn't even let me get my wallet. They just assumed double quotes, I know, said Maria, holding her hand. Let's go home. We'll talk there. On her way back, Maria received a call from General Braddock. Jenkins, is the situation resolved? Yes, sir. My family is safe. Good. We need you here in 2 hours. The operation has been brought forward. Maria looked at her family in the back seat. Marcus had fallen asleep, exhausted from the morning's trauma. Maya remained awake, but her eyes were distant, processing the events. Understood, sir. I'll be there. Upon arriving home, they found the residence in disarray. The police had ransacked closets and drawers during the search. Furniture was out of place, and various personal belongings were scattered on the floor. They treated our house like a crime scene, David commented, his voice thick with restrained indignation. Maria observed the devastation with a mixture of anger and determination. This won't stand, David. I promise. While helping her family reorganize the house, Maria made more calls. First, to a civil lawyer, specializing in civil rights. Then, to journalists who covered military affairs and who would respect the sensitivity of her position. An hour later, after settling the children in and ensuring David was all right, Maria prepared to return to base. I have to go, she said, hugging her husband. The operation can't wait. David nodded, understanding as always. I understand, but when I get back, we need to talk about what happened today, about what it means for us, for the children. We'll talk, and we'll settle things. On the helicopter back to Fort Bragg, Maria tried to refocus on the mission, but her mind kept returning to images of her traumatized family. As a soldier, she had faced dangers all over the world, protecting American interests and citizens. But who protected her own family on American soil? Upon arriving at the base, he went straight to the operating room where the team was waiting. General Braddock greeted her with a brief nod. Jenkins, ready to continue? Yes, sir, over the next few hours. Maria conducted the final briefing for the operation, reviewing every detail of the rescue plan. Her professional mind took over, temporarily setting aside her personal trauma to focus on the mission. At 9 p.m., the operation was launched. 3 Black Hawk helicopters carrying Alpha and Bravo teams took off for Yemen, where they would meet with naval forces for the final phase of the mission. Maria coordinated everything from the command center, maintaining constant communication with the teams in the field. The operation was a success. The ambassador and his team were rescued with minimal casualty, and the terrorists were neutralized. When confirmation arrived, the command room erupted in applause. "Excellent work, Jenkins," praised General Braddock. "As always, your leadership was impeccable." Maria accepted the compliment with a brief nod, but her mind was already returning to Atlanta, to her family who still needed her. "I request permission to return to my family, sir. We have a situation that needs to be resolved." The general studied her for a moment. "The incident this morning?" "Yes, sir. My husband was detained without cause, and my children were taken by social services due to a false accusation based on racial profiling." General Braddock was silent for a moment before replying, "Granted. And Jenkins, use all necessary resources. The Army supports its officers." Maria understood the implicit message. She had not only permission but institutional support to seek justice. 3 days later, Maria sat in a conference room at the Atlanta Police Department. Beside her were David, military attorney Colonel Harriman, and civil rights attorney Dr. Benjamin Goldstein. Across the table were Police Chief Donovan, Captain Peterson, Detective Reynolds, and the department attorney. "Gentlemen," Dr. Goldstein began, "we are here to discuss Wednesday's incident involving the family of Lieutenant Colonel Jenkins. My preliminary investigations reveal multiple procedural violations and potential civil rights violations." Chief Donovan cleared his throat uncomfortably. "Dr. Goldstein, our officers acted on a tip they believed to be credible. An anonymous tip that a black man was entering a residence in a predominantly white neighborhood," Goldstein responded, "without further verification, without attempting to contact the residents, without a warrant. And when the legitimate resident tried to explain the situation, he was assaulted and detained." "The suspect resisted arrest," Captain Peterson argued. "My client was on his private property when armed officers entered without authorization," Goldstein countered. "Any resistance was simply an attempt to protect his children from armed strangers." Maria watched the exchange with apparent calm, but inside, her anger continued to simmer. She waited for the lawyers to finish their opening arguments before speaking. "Chief Donovan, I want to make it clear that we are not here just to discuss financial compensation, although that is part of the process. We are here because we want to ensure that what happened to my family does not happen again to other families." She opened a folder and placed photographs on the table. "These are images of my husband's face after being approached by his officers. These are drawings my 10-year-old daughter made after the incident, showing nightmares about police officers raiding our house. This is my 8-year-old son's medical report, diagnosed with acute traumatic anxiety." The silence in the room was heavy as the photos circulated. "As a high-ranking military officer, I protect this country and its values every day. I risk my life to ensure that Americans can live safely. And yet, my own family is not safe in their home because the color of our skin automatically makes us suspect." Chief Donovan seemed genuinely disturbed. "Lieutenant Colonel, I deeply regret what happened. I will personally ensure that a full investigation is conducted and that appropriate disciplinary measures are taken." "That's not enough, boss," Maria replied firmly. "We want a complete overhaul of the procedures for responding to anonymous complaints, mandatory anti-bias training for all officers, and the implementation of a civilian oversight committee with real enforcement powers." The meeting continued for another 2 hours, with tense negotiations over the terms of the agreement. In the end, a compromise was reached. The department would implement new training policies, establish an oversight committee, and offer substantial financial compensation, which the Jenkins family decided to donate to civil rights organizations. As she left the meeting, Maria felt a mixture of satisfaction and melancholy. A battle had been won, but the war against prejudice continued. "We accomplished something today," David commented as they walked to the car. "But tomorrow, another black family will face the same problem somewhere in this country, and that's why we will continue fighting," Maria replied. "On all fronts." 2 weeks later, the Jenkins family gathered for a special dinner. Maya and Marcus were gradually overcoming the trauma, although they still showed anxiety when they saw police cars. David had returned to work at the university, where he was greeted with solidarity by colleagues and students. "I have some news to share," Maria announced as dessert was served. "I've been invited to take on a new role at the Pentagon, overseeing diversity and inclusion programs in the Special Forces. David looked at her in surprise. That means ... It means we'll be together in Washington. No more long separation. No more living in two cities. Maya and Marcus excitedly celebrated the news. And what happened to Helen, the neighbor who called the police? Marcus asked, innocent. Maria and David exchanged glances. Helen was invited to participate in a community diversity awareness program, David replied diplomatically. And her house is for sale. Maria smiled slightly. The community had reacted strongly to the incident, with the older neighbors showing support for the Jenkins family and ostracizing Helen. That night, after the children had fallen asleep, Maria and David sat on the porch, gazing at the stars. You know what's ironic? Maria commented. I spend my professional life fighting external threats when some of the worst threats we face are right here, at home. David took her hand. And that's why we need people like you in positions of power and influence to combat these internal threats as well. Maria nodded thoughtfully. Her career had been dedicated to protecting American values abroad. Now, she would use her experience, training, and position to protect those same values at home, starting with her own family. The following day, as she entered the Pentagon for her first meeting in her new role, Lieutenant Colonel Maria Jenkins carried not only her military experience but also a new personal mission to ensure that the country she served with such dedication lived up to its ideals for all citizens, regardless of the color of their skin. As she walked the corridors of American military power, Maria reflected on how her dual identity as an elite commander and as a Black woman in a society still marked by racism, it provided her with a unique and valuable perspective. The battles she had fought in the fields and at home now converged on a single mission, transformation, and she was more than prepared for this new Battlefront.